So my name is Viktoria Keding. Thank you, Elisa, for the wonderful introduction. I'm the director and co-founder of NaDEET, Namib Desert Environmental Education Trust. And this evening, I want to share with you our we practice what we teach approach to environmental education. NaDEET was started in 2003, so we are indeed celebrating 20 years. And this is a beautiful photograph of our staff. And our mission is to protect the natural environment of Namibia by educating its citizens to practice a sustainable lifestyle. But the question really is, maybe to get started, is why NaDEET? Why did we start an environmental education organization? And I think one of the things that is really key in Namibia and in Southern Africa is we have so many different environmental problems. We talk about water wasting and air pollution, deforestation, littering, poaching, and so on. But I think actually the greatest harm to us and the environment is actually environmental ignorance and, unfortunately, apathy. And this is really the reason for NaDEET. And when I started teaching environmental education, I actually was teaching at another center in Namibia before I started NaDEET. And while I was there, I really was thinking, this was the beginning of my career, I thought a lot about the questions of what should environmental education actually be teaching? And also, how should we be teaching it? What's the methodologies that we should be using? From the beginning, I just loved the idea of an environmental education center. I could remember when I was in grade 5 and I went on a nature's classroom and I got to go to an environmental education center. So I always felt that there were very high, I had high expectations, and I feel that environmental education centers just play such an important role globally to address the issue of apathy. But the question again is, what should we be teaching? How should we be teaching it? And then ultimately, what is really education for sustainable development and a sustainable world? And for me, the answer actually came when I was teaching at this other center. We used to always have programs. They were on the weekends only. They went Friday afternoons, the groups would arrive and they would leave Sunday by lunchtime. And it was very typical African bush style. The groups always came with their tents. We camped outside. We, of course, made a bushfire so that we could cook our food. What I think is very typical in the African environment, you go into nature and you use the resources that are there. But one evening when I was sitting by the fire, one of the children came up to me, actually it was a grade 11 learner, and he said to me, "Miss, don't you believe in deforestation?" And I thought I hadn't heard him correctly, because what an odd question for a school child to be asking me when I had just been teaching him the entire day, the whole group. We had been learning about the environment and about the importance, especially about large carnivores. And here he was questioning whether or not I believed in deforestation. And I didn't really know what to say to him, but it made me really go deep in myself and think about, what have I been doing? What am I doing at this center? What am I actually teaching? And so this is what I'm showing you now on the screen. Is I started looking at the program and thinking about, well, how many hours are the children actually at the center with me? And how many of those hours am I telling them something versus how many of the hours are they watching me as an environmental educator doing things? And so I realized that actually the number of hours in the weekend actually came to be about 27 hours in total of what I have called here total awake center hours. So when we're not sleeping, that we were awake together. And of those, 12 of the hours were living hours. These are the hours where we were preparing food, we were eating breakfast or lunch, kids were taking a shower, we were relaxing and just having free time. So almost half of the time that the group was actually at the center, we were just doing living things. And this is the time that I believe that this learner who questioned me was observing unsustainability. He saw that actually we just made a big bonfire, we were using water without saving it. We did have some recycling, but I think it wasn't really the way that he felt that it should be. And so this is what inspired me to come up with this "we practice what we teach" philosophy. So if we take a 24-hour day, you can divide that day, let's say, into 3 different sections. So hopefully 8 of the hours you're sleeping, but 8 of the hours during the day for adults, we're busy working, but for children, they are doing either school or they are studying for school, or maybe they're in after-school activities. And the other 8 hours of the day is really when we are taking care of ourselves. And these 8 hours are the hours where we are so busy using resources. This is usually when we use most of the water, the energy, the electricity in our own personal lives and households. So this is where I feel that environmental education and environmental education centers has the opportunity to actually change our approach. And nowadays it's called a whole institutional approach. 20 years ago, there wasn't such a name for it. I called it the hidden curriculum, because I felt that this was the time when we could teach about how can we live sustainably with our environment. And this is what I'm going to share with you this evening. So NaDEET's main programs that we now run are NaDEET Center on Namib Nature Reserve, the Urban Sustainability Center in Swakopmund, our Teacher Professional Development Program, Teach for ESD, and our environmental publications in our Environmental Literacy Program. Starting off with NaDEET Center, because this is really where it all began. This is our environmental education center in the magic of the desert and the heart of the Namib Nature Reserve. And you can see here it lies far from any other place. It's in southern Namibia. For those of you who don't know Namibia very well, it's actually on the edge of the Namib National Park, which is also a World Heritage Site. And it is approximately 150 kilometers away from the closest town and 100 kilometers away from the famous sand dunes of Sossusvlei. So it is very remote, but it is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And there we offer a residential 4-day hands-on EE program to school children, youth, educator, and adult groups about sustainable living. And really, as I've emphasized now, living at NaDEET Center is also learning. And these are just a few photos to give you a feel for what it's like. The learners or the school children are sitting outside of their bungalow. We have bunk beds inside. Free time, of course, is also spent doing sports. But as I mentioned, all of our cooking is done using solar cookers. We have bucket showers, waste management, and these we are going to explore. We use house teams. This is where the participants, they share rooms and bathrooms, they cook and they clean together. And then in these teams, they are always single-sex teams, or single gender, sorry. And the idea being that, gender equality is also a big issue when it comes to sustainability. And so it not only gives girls a chance, for example, to allow the boys to cook, but vice versa, the boys also have a chance to cook without the girls correcting them, as sometimes can happen with school groups. And then we also use class teams, and this is where we do just mix the children up into random groups that they can work together with different kids from their class. And I think one of the important parts about this is that in order for us to grapple with sustainability and to come up with solutions for sustainability, we really need to develop our core skills in personal, social, and our communication skills. And this is part of the responsibility of being in these teams. So I now want to go a little bit deeper into what actually happens at NaDEET Center. And I'm starting off with one of the things that Namibia has been blessed with, And that is really our free energy. You know, Namibia has almost 365 days of sunshine. We have extremely powerful incoming solar radiation, and we have clear skies most of the time. And therefore it allows us to actually use the sunshine directly through solar cooking. And this is really one of the things that has as a fundamental part of the NaDEET Center program. So you can see here there are parabolic solar cookers, as well as solar ovens. And on the right, there's actually our solar electricity park that provides all of the electricity for the center. But what's important for us is that every participant is cooking and preparing and cooking their own food using solar energy. And since the beginning of NaDEET, every meal except for breakfast is actually made in this way. And most people are astonished to see that you could even cook chicken, for example, on a solar cooker. So there are no limitations. All you need to do is plan. And so this is a very good example of what I'll continue to be sharing with you this evening, and how the NaDEET Center actually addresses the issue of utilizing all of the hours of the day for sustainability. So in the case of solar cooking that I was just sharing, this is one of the key activities, and you can see our program now on the left. There, the yellow blocks, those are the solar cooking hours, and they're in the middle of the day, in the middle of the morning hours, prime learning time. So instead of cooking being something that's on the side, it's actually a feature and an important part of the process. But we also, of course, would like the learners, as well as any age participants who come to NaDEET, to understand, why do solar cookers work? What's the simple science behind it? And so those learners, they are now looking at understanding light and heat, and that's just a simple experiment with reflection, but it's actually reflection that makes solar cookers and solar ovens work. And being in the Namib Desert on the Namib Nature Reserve is, of course, an amazing opportunity for us to then also learn and investigate the beautiful biodiversity that we have there. And the question would be, now, what does this have to do with solar cooking? And the answer of that is everything. So these insects on the right-hand side there, those are waxy toktoki beetles. And they're a perfect example. You can see the white layer of wax that the toktoki has formed over the day. It's very hot. And so during the day, that waxy layer, it reflects the sunshine, and in order to keep the toktoki cool. And that's, of course, something that we can learn from to cool ourselves down during the day, but also for us to go back to the idea, again, of reflection and the role that reflection has in solar cooking. So if we continue and look now at another important topic for us in the desert, and of course in Namibia, is water. Namibia is one of the driest countries in southern Africa, and I've shown here on the left-hand side actually groundwater in Namibia, and NaDEET is on the very edge to the Namib Desert, to the brown part, where there is actually very limited groundwater, and we are just there in an area where we still have aquifers. But one of our biggest threats in the country is water pollution. We only have perennial rivers on our northern and southern borders. We don't have any perennial rivers inland. Those are all ephemeral rivers. And so interestingly enough, when it does rain, there's a lot of pollution that has built up in the ephemeral rivers because people don't recognize them as important water courseways. So there's sanitation and industrial and urban waste, and of course also from agricultural practices. And unfortunately, I think maintenance is one of Namibia's biggest problems, and there's a lot of wasting of water, especially due to broken pipes. So at NaDEET Center, we take a very simple approach to raising consciousness about water. And this consciousness about water actually begins with our bathrooms. We call them water-wise washrooms. And on the left, you can see that there are actually no taps at the wash basin sink. And this is not because we cannot install a tap there, but it's to point out that when you walk into the bathroom, you see a sink, a wash basin, you would expect there to be taps, and there is no tap. It's already the first aha moment of, wait, what's wrong with this scenario? Why are they doing this? So of course, it's to actually, to have the you can use a cup to wash, to brush your teeth, or a cup to fill the basin to wash your face and your hands. The girl in the middle, she's using a bucket shower, so she's filling the bucket actually with hot water from our solar hot water geyser. And so the idea is not to have people think that they may not use any water. The idea is actually to try to do the things that you normally do, but be conscious about the amount of water being used. And the way that we check this is by actually doing water counting, and by having all of the water at the center either being counted through water meters, or as you can see on the right-hand side with water tanks. And this is a great opportunity to incorporate math into sustainability education and environmental education. Math teachers are also often the first to say there's no way you can teach about the environment in math, but I completely disagree. And then we also use dry toilets at NaDEET Center, and this of course saves an unbelievable amount of water. So we have an average water use of approximately 15 liters of water per person per day for all of the water that is used at NaDEET Center during their stay for one day. Moving on to waste. Waste in Namibia and in Southern Africa is, of course, also a big problem. We're in the decade of oceans, so plastic pollution also on our coast. Last week, we had a talk here about plastic and seals. Littering is still a huge issue, also where people are just dumping their household rubbish wherever they want to. Fast food and convenience is something that's taken over in many places. So we have lots of styrofoam, and our landfills are actually just growing. So this is an issue that most of our municipalities and villages are just not equipped yet to deal with. And a lot of it, again, I think, is the apathy. Is it really a problem or not? And so at NaDEET Center, we are looking also at different ways of how can we deal with our waste. Especially for us, it's a very far distance to travel between different locations. Namibia has very few people. So we are also looking for ways that we can actually recycle and reuse our own waste. So we do have a recycling system where we divide and separate our rubbish. And all of the paper rubbish that we produce at the center or also in our offices, for example, we turn these into recycled fireballs. We originally actually made bricks with it, but then people told us, oh, they don't know how to make the bricks. They don't have a brick maker. So we just said, well, it doesn't matter. We can just make balls. It works the same way. So there you can see if you take paper and you mash it and add water. So you take paper, you shred it, you add water, soak it overnight, then you can mash it into something like a soft pup. And when it's nice and soft, then we add some sawdust, or you can add leaves or any other type of material that would also help with the burning. And then the recycled fireballs must first dry. By us in the desert, it usually takes about 2 days until the balls are dry. Of course, we do lose some of that water to evaporation, but most of the water we have squeezed out. And this we then reuse on our compost down where we are making our own soil from food waste. So this is a really exciting example of how villages and locations that are very remote, who don't have enough firewood, can actually use a waste product to solve their energy crisis and therefore reduce deforestation. Hopefully that learner that asked me that question many, many years ago, in the meantime, has also learned about fireballs. One of the key elements of the NaDEET Center program is for us to also measure our enviro footprint. I think this is a very important part about reflecting. And I think many people who are living in Europe and in other countries, they're used to just going on the internet and clicking on some kind of a online enviro footprint calculator. But at NaDEET Center, we do it in a very practical way. And we have set up meters for energy, for water. We weigh all of our waste, and it's done in such a way that it's simple for all of our participants to actually be able to then measure their impact. And I want to give one example of the measuring our energy use, because I think this is one of the most powerful messages that we have to give about the importance of solar cooking, especially when it comes to combating climate change. And so at NaDEET Center, we have come up with this little graph that's in the middle of the slide called pollution from cooking. And in this slide, we've estimated that each one of these little clouds is approximately 250 grams of CO2 pollution. So most of our electricity, although it's luckily changing, but most of it is still coming from coal production. So that would now be 5 of these pollution clouds. Gas cooking would be 4 pollution clouds. An open fire is also 4. The fuel efficient stove, which you can see on the right-hand side there, which is this paint drum, that is only using 1 pollution cloud, and solar, of course, uses none. We are using these fuel efficient stoves that they are testing on the right side there for breakfast, because there we don't have any sunshine. So we must cook our breakfast using those. And there the participants are actually having a cook-off to see who can boil as much water as possible with as little fuel as possible. And so there, the open fire, everyone always very confident that the traditional open fire will be successful, but actually it takes 8 minutes to boil 2 liters of water on an open fire, while the fuel efficient stove only takes 4 minutes and can be very easily powered with the fireballs. So it's a clear winner for the fuel efficient stove. And that's really the cooking that we are doing in the mornings. And the rest of our cooking, if you go back to the charts, you can see that approximately in 1 week at NaDEET Center, we would use 15 hours of cooking on solar, and that produces 0 pollution. And then we have 2 hours on the fuel efficient stoves. So that would now be 2 clouds or 500 grams. So at the end of the week, we have cooked for 17 hours and we have therefore produced 0.5 kilograms of CO2, which is nothing. It's such a small amount. For the purpose of our exercise in measuring our footprints, we then compare, well, what if we had that center from long ago where we didn't practice what we teach, where we actually used the traditional open fire, and we had cooked 17 hours on the open fire. Then we would have to also multiply by our 4 clouds times 250 grams, and we would be at 17 kilograms. So 34 times as much as with the solar cooker and the fuel efficient stove. And so if you calculate then over 1 year, the significance of 55 kilograms versus 1,870, if you multiply that over 20 years of NaDEET, and let's multiply it over all the environmental education centers, educational institutes around Southern Africa, and we would start making a difference. And so this is a key component of the NaDEET Center program, is to understand and to use these auditing features to recognize the impact that our positive actions can have on the environment. And so it's important that we, of course, also just that I show you what happens behind the scenes at NaDEET, because with the practice what we teach approach, you cannot do one thing and show that and then actually behind the scenes do something different. So the picture at the top is actually of our base where our staff live when there's not a group, and it's where our office is and operations. There we have some veggie garden houses in the front. We have students that are also doing environmental auditing. You can see in the middle, there's our compost. So all of our food waste is actually going into the compost, which goes back into the garden, which goes back into food for the center. And on the right-hand side is a little bakkie that's called a fonk, and it's actually an e-vehicle. And we've had this now for the last 2 years, and therefore we no longer use any fossil fuels to drive around NaDEET Center while we are actually on site. So our carbon footprint continues to reduce, and we are taking every action we can to always make sure that we are monitoring our use and that we are practicing what we are teaching. And so I just want to share a little bit also with the beautiful Namib Nature Reserve that we are situated in, that really motivates our practice, because this is what we are trying to protect, is that we have these unbelievable landscapes of healthy natural environment that we can enjoy on foot and just connect with nature in ways that are very important for us also as humans. So nature really is our teacher. And it's not just our teacher during the day at NaDEET Center, but it's also our teacher at night. And astronomy is something that is a big part of our program and is one of the activities that is most loved. Although many people sit outside at nighttime and see the stars, there's very little information about actually about the night sky. And so you can see on the bottom right, we have also a picture of NaDEET Center and what it looks like at nighttime. Here we have the night light pollution, which is a big issue for us actually in urban areas, and Africa in general doesn't have it as so much of an issue yet, but it needs to be something that's brought to the forefront of sustainable development. Obviously, using fully shielded light fixtures is a way for us to prevent biodiversity from losing their natural rhythms in life. It also can actually improve combating crime, because it doesn't blind you, and it can also help us become more aware of being energy efficient. That night sky brightness at the bottom right, the Namib Nature Reserve, we are all the way on the left of having an excellent dark sky. Actually, our sky is so dark, and in the normal inner city sky is on the right-hand side where the red light is. And therefore, the Namib Nature Reserve with NaDEET Center as its educational core was actually given the status of the first international dark sky reserve in all of Africa in 2012. So finishing off with NaDEET Center and finishing off the program at NaDEET Center, one of the important aspects, of course, at the end of the day, which also I think this light pollution and astronomy brings us towards, is the fact that we also need to think global. So after all of these local activities, what can we do to improve our own sustainability, our own households? The question is now, what can we also do, or how do these things actually impact the global environment? So we teach about sustainability and are also looking at, these learners are now exploring how have they actually addressed sustainability while they were at NaDEET. And what's interesting now is that Namibia is actually going more urban. And by 2030, it's estimated that 60% of the world's population will live in urban areas. And for Namibia, we are, as I mentioned before, we're actually a very large country. We only have 2.3 million people in the entire country, so it's very low densities. And actually, we have a lot of space, but still people are starting to really migrate towards the cities, and it's changing the way that Namibians live. And we didn't have our last census on time due to COVID, but it actually will take place at the end of this year. And there I would expect that the 43% that's listed here in 2011 will be over 50% now in 2023. And so with that, we also need to start looking at education for urban sustainability. And there we have Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which is focused on sustainable cities and communities. And some of the key topics that we need to look at is actually the issue of housing, transport, energy and water, population, cultural heritage, waste and pollution, and open spaces. And this is what I've been talking about at NaDEET Center, but now we need to look at what does this look like in an urban environment? because of course that is where most of the people are living most of the time. So how can we make sure that we can connect to nature in that way? And so therefore in 2019, we opened our second center to continue with our We Practice What We Teach approach. And this is a much smaller center. It's in Swakopmund, in the Orongo region on the coast. And this center is really looking at the issues of urban sustainability. And there we are offering a 3-day school program. And most of the visitors, they are actually from the coast and they come in for the day and then go home again, unlike NaDEET Center, which is residential. During the program, we are using our hands-on environmental learning center that we have created inside the urban center. The first key feature is a room called Exploring Namibia Room, where actually Elisa, who was so kind to introduce me, there you can see her amazing artwork and her talent, where she's really brought the different environmental issues that we have at the coast alive through an interactive mural. That then continues into our eco house, which is basically just a model house, not to look at how should we build the houses themselves, but how can we as people actually live in our houses. So there we're also looking at things like how to use a hot box, and if you do have an electric stove, how can you use it more efficiently? The learners at the bottom, they are looking at different types of toilets, low flush toilets, normal toilets, that they can also understand the differences once you move to town and people start having lots of conveniences. How can we make sure that those are also handled as efficiently as possible? And our eco cafe, which is not open to the public, it's just for our groups, but that's the theme. You know, it's there for us to look at different types of food that we could be eating, where does it come from, and also auditing that food. One of the key activities from the Urban Sustainability Center is actually a walk through town. And this is what I mentioned, is that Swakopmund is now our nature, it's our environment. And in Swakopmund, we're blessed to be right next to the ocean, and we also have numerous parks. But this walk, the learners actually go through town and they look for examples of the Good Life Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals that they can possibly find. So they have this little booklet, and then they go to a set number of stations, like the recycling center, or the recycling drums that are at the bottom right. We actually have a zero waste shop that the learners get to visit and see lots of local produce and learn about the issues around using plastics. And so this is a very exciting opportunity, again, in a way now to do auditing, not just of our personal life, but also to do auditing of our communities and looking further. And this is where it then looks at how can NaDEET now move beyond our centers? How can we expand our programs? How can we reach more people? Because we are actually starting to run out of time. We need to be able to have more people who are actually working with us to teach ESD and to teach sustainability. And so our two-year professional development program for Namibian teachers in ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, aims to improve the implementation of ESD at school level, according to the national curriculum, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the national EE and ESD policy. Teach for ESD, the program itself, is very exciting. The basis of it is a Teach for ESD toolkit, which is to raise improve access to environmental education materials and to background information. For example, Share Screen Africa would be a perfect example of something to be in the Teach for ESD toolkit. We then have hands-on training at our different centers, and then teachers are tasked to use what they learned at the trainings together with their toolkits to now, again, in teams, take school-based ESD action. And for that action, they can apply to us for badges. And when they've been successful, they receive up to 10 badges for their work. And we then also go visit them at school to provide them with support and feedback. And at the end of the two-year program, we award those teachers who have done well and have succeeded with awards for excellence. So we are extremely happy with our first Teach for ESD group that finished at the end of last year, because those 240 teachers that were in our program in all 14 regions of Namibia have worked with 75,000 learners and teachers to create ESD agency. Many started environmental clubs. They celebrated Valentine's Day with a green Valentine. They planted indigenous gardens, brought biodiversity back into their schoolyards. They made food gardens. They had campaigns, for example, at the bottom there's a picture of a rhino to protect different animals, and the list goes on. It's very impressive how much action actually took place around the country. And now these teachers have themselves formed a network of peers and will hopefully continue to teach others. And it's this multiplier effect that's so important to us. And so we are continuing to do this throughout as many of our activities as possible. So also university students, for example, that come to NaDEET Center, we give them financial support that when they return back to university, that they can give back to campus and that they can show what have they learned at NaDEET, so that they don't just keep it for themselves, but that they actually spread the word. And these are pictures of the University of Namibia in Keetmanshoop in southern Namibia. They celebrated Earth Day this year by making this incredible model of an earth and also by planting trees. We also have our environmental literacy materials that we spoke of before. These are really there to support our teaching and our programs, but also for us to just allow our teachers now, for example, to teach further and to give them resources that are really Namibian focused and speak to the Namibian audience. And lastly, we have many nature conservation students that do their practicals with us. I've actually lost count, but I think we've had much over 40 students that have done practicals with us in the last 20 years. Many of them have then come to be employed by NaDEET, and many have then gone on to also work for government. So it's very nice to now be able to walk down government halls and actually see former interns that know what ESD and sustainability is about, are hopefully integrating it into other aspects of their work. So NaDEET continues to reach upwards. We are also working with UNESCO to achieve the ESD for 2030 vision. This is the Education for Sustainable Development vision for reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. And there, NaDEET has done a lot to support the national movement for ESD for 2030, especially through developing the national EEESD policy. Namibia is actually very proud. We are the only country in sub-Saharan Africa that, or southern Africa, sorry, that has, the first, that has its own standalone policy for ESD. And we now also have a strategy and action plan, and I'm serving on the National ESD Task Force for us to work together as a country to further ESD in Namibia. And that brings me almost to the end of my talk, but I do want to just share some of our other key achievements. In 2018, we were very fortunate to be given the UNESCO Japan Prize on ESD for our work in ESD and our transformative approach. At NaDEET Center, we've had close to 16,000 participants in over 480 programs. At the Urban Center, despite COVID, we've also already had 1,000 participants in over 30 programs since 2019. We've had over 240 teachers, as I mentioned, who've worked with 60,000 learners and 15,000 other teachers and colleagues, so 75,000 other school members. And we've produced over 50 environmental literacy publications. So yeah, so really the work that we are trying to do is to have a multiplier effect in Namibia to spread ESD, to improve the condition of ESD in the country. And ultimately our aim is to create change agents. And we are inspired by the Namibian child, and we hope that the Namibian child is inspired by us through our approach to ESD, that it's experiential, that it's nature-based, and that it's fun. And I think this is really one of the key elements, is that we are bringing in this seriousness about the issues around sustainability, but in a nature-based, experiential, and fun way for us to create change agents. And so this year we are celebrating 20 years of NaDEET, and we welcome you to celebrate this with us. And thank you so much for listening to my talk this evening.
Victoria and all of your team, I just love the way that you guys have done everything, presented it. I mean, the whole looking at the thing in terms of living it is just, yeah, we can all learn a lesson from this. And I think you guys have really outdone yourselves, but you continue to grow and you continue to inspire, and really, really well done. I'm going to hand over to Ruan. I think there were a number of questions and lots of awesome comments in the chat. So hand over to Ruan and let him take over the Q&A. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marty. And then happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's on your birthday. It's wonderful. So I'm going to open the chat and I'm going to ask Asima if she wants to unmute, because you basically wrote the entire chat section, Asima. So I'm going to find you. But if you can help me, it would be wonderful.
I've asked her to unmute.
Lovely. Thank you. Asima, the moment that you can. If not, then I'll just ask your questions for you, but it would be a shame. They're wonderful questions. Asima, I'm just going to start off and we can ask your questions as they are. The first one from Asima, a student from TUT. Would you say that helplessness could be the reason for people damaging the environment?
Yes, I think it is actually, I think it's this many times not knowing what to do, you know, and thinking that what we need to do is so difficult. And that's really what I was trying to show, is that actually many of us can do many things that are not difficult. So I think it's often an excuse, but I think it's something that we can overcome through education.
Good answer, thank you. And then I'm just going to go on until someone jumps up and down. So please jump up and down, or wave at me, scream at me if you can, or use the reaction tools provided to us by Cheryl. Is absolutely in all there. She's enjoying herself. So let's, I think you answered that one. Let's, again from Asima, how do you deal with the water pollution as you have taught them how to use water efficiently? Has the method that you used been effective?
Yeah, so I must admit that water pollution itself then is not a major focus of our program. So it's really about the water saving and becoming aware of how important the water is. Ironically, because we use so little water at NaDEET Center, we also don't have any large water recycling systems. It's just not enough water. But actually it's effective because we are having the water go straight to, or not straight, but through a filtration system. They go to the roots of trees. And I think this is also, again, trying to have an example of what can people do at home. So I think the water, yeah.
Wonderful, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm going to open the floor now and open with our two big guns. Our speaker for last week, Dr. Koster. Emlyn, it's lovely to have you back with us.
Thank you, Juan. And that was beyond a fantastic and effectively presented exemplar of what the world needs in a hurry. So I can't say enough about it. But my two questions are, to what extent do you think the origination of this project, or this initiative, this cause, this movement, was helped by having such a pristine natural environment to begin with as sort of the backdrop and the stage? Did that really help to allow your participants to realize their link with nature? And I secondly, I was not surprised to see the last slide about the awards you received, but I think the recognition of what you're doing as a global best practice, to the degree to which it's replicable and scalable, you can't go at that fast enough in the interest of making this exemplar known to the world. So those are my two questions. If you would just give me a comment about each of those, if you would.
I fully agree with you that I think being in such a pristine environment is definitely a motivating factor into taking action. I think, especially in Namibia, so many children have never even been in the Namib Desert, which is the namesake of our country. So having that opportunity to just sit in those red sand dunes and enjoy the nature that you see and the trees and the sunsets is just incredible. But I think it's also that combination together with this hands-on approach to sustainability. When we ask the children or ask any of the participants, what was your favorite activity? Top activity is always taking a dune walk, astronomy, being under the dark sky, and then there's solar cooking. So I think it's that combination. And with the scaling up, I would love to scale up. We are trying, and I think part of it is not just access to funding, but also access to developing enough young people that are ready to also teach ESD. And this is why we were emphasizing it's so important for us to build these multipliers, because you can't just start to expand and then not have the ethos behind how to do the teaching. I think that's a very important part. So we've had slow but steady growth and hope for more.
Could I just add quickly that I think that you demonstrate so clearly what the true meaning and potential of this overused word sustainability is, because everything you live and breathe and do is absolutely a worked example of what minimum impact and preserving resources for further generations involves. And I say that because the term is so poorly used and so misunderstood that I think the degree to which you could help in your promotions and publications so elucidate what sustainability should mean and can mean when you do it the way you are doing would be a very great contribution as well.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Emlyn. And then moving on to our stalwart figure, Dr. Ogilvie.
Hi, Victoria. I would like to say thank you. I've been in conservation since 1984, and I've been lecturing at Tshwane University of Technology since 1996. But I started my environmental education training well before that, and I fell in love with it. I eat it, I breathe it, and I sleep it. And I thought I would never meet somebody who would be like me. And and I did tonight, because I eat it and I see you do the same, and you sleep it and you breathe it and you do everything. And all what I can say is thank you for going that extra mile for the children. To run an environmental education center is not easy. I'm running one at Indumu on the border of Mozambique and Swaziland, but it's not near as effective as your EE center. And all what I would like to say is continue the mile, go the extra mile. And yeah, we're busy with the share screen series at the moment. And tonight I told my students they have to link on, because this is EE. And what they are seeing tonight was exactly what I said. By the way, I did write up, one of my chapters is on NaDEET in my thesis.
Oh,
and it was written in 2019. So yeah, it's your whole organization is slap bang in the middle of my thesis, because I was there 15 years ago, and I said, people cannot miss this. And thank you, and well done to your team. That's all I can say. Geez, you blew me away tonight, and I knew you would, because I've seen it, and it's just growing bigger and bigger. And I'm just glad my students witnessed it tonight. And I hope one day I'll get there again to be part of it again and learn again from you guys, because I've got a lot to learn still. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. And you must actually send me your thesis, or I must look it up. And of course, you are most welcome to bring a group of university students.
Do you want them?
Absolutely. We're waiting for them.
I'll definitely try and bring my advanced students to you. I've got a group of 38, and maybe next year we'll bring the next lot through, but let's see what we can do. And I'm sure they can only benefit from what you guys are doing. Well done. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Asima, your hand was up. You're still unmuted, so you're more than welcome to jump in, steal the screen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Finally. Good evening to everybody. So basically I have two questions. One I typed out already in the chat box, and then the next question I will ask it. So basically I wanted to know that basically when you take out a specific resource, for example, you tell them that they shouldn't do deforestation, or they shouldn't be washing in the river, or the waste management, etc. So when you take away that specific resource that they have been living with, or they've been using their whole entire life, what do you like substitute or give back to them after you have taken that specific resource from them?
My internet connection unfortunately cut out. Can you just repeat the last part of that question?
Okay, so I'm asking, so the resource which you take away from the people, example, the trees that they use for the firewood, etc. After removing that specific resource from them, what do you substitute, or what do you give back to them? Because remember, this is what they have been living on their whole entire life. And then here we are, we're coming telling them that, no, you shouldn't do this and you should do that. But then what exactly do you give back to them in order for them not to destroy the environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question for the clarification, because we never take anything away from anybody. So I think our main message is really to say, if we want to move forward sustainably, then we need to learn to use those resources in a
It might be Victoria. If you can hear me, you've
and we need
frozen.
to learn how to change.
Victoria, could you repeat that, please? You froze midway.
Yes, I was saying that we never take anything away. We would never suggest that you should stop doing something completely. So I think the issue of cooking, for example, is very important, because there's a necessity for cooking, for example, on an open fire in many traditional practices. And in order to ensure that we still have firewood for those events, then on many other events that are insignificant, then we can use things like the fuel efficient stove with the recycled fireballs. So these are actually trying to build up a variety and alternatives. So it's never something to say, don't do this at all and now do this. And that's the same thing with the water. At NaDEET, for example, we are never saying to the kids, don't shower, don't use water. What we are saying is, you should shower, you must, but you must think about how much water you are using to shower. And it also doesn't help if you, on the end of your week, you go home and then you take a huge shower and you saved at NaDEET. That doesn't make any sense either. So the whole idea behind the concept is to learn how to do what we do more efficiently. How can we do it using less, but still obviously look at how can we have a lifestyle that is going to fulfill our needs, but maybe not every one of our desires, right?
Asima, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with
Oh, there we go. Lovely. Your second question, or any
Okay, so,
comments?
firstly, thank you for answering that question. And then I wanted to know, would you say that emotion also plays a role? As we know, humans will protect basically what they love. So the emotional attachment, to what degree do you think it'll play a part basically in us conserving nature, apart from us knowing or gaining knowledge and having our hands on? Would you say that also the emotional attachment is needed? And then if so, to what degree?
I fully think that this is so needed, and I think this is why environmental education centers are so important. I think if you're sitting in a classroom at school, there's only so much that a teacher can achieve at that moment in time in order to really address and speak to the emotions. And I think this is also where, as previously answering a question, we're saying that being in a place like NaDEET Center, or being in a place where you look at nature in a different way and connecting with nature, I think this is one of the significant pathways to actually becoming a multiplier and becoming somebody who practices sustainability. So I think this is a very important part of sustainable development, of environmental education, and being in nature. So definitely.
Okay, thank you. That would be all.
Thank you very much, Asima, and thank you very much, Victoria. Apologies for switching off your screen. Maret did it just to save up some bandwidth and make it easier for you to answer. And then there's one question from many wonderful comments from everyone, from Subila Ritmiller in Tanzania with Chumbe Island, wonderful program there. Pabalu, just giving a massive round of applause. Maura Bierkes, she sent her kids in May and she was blown away. Thank you for the hope. And then let's ask Gina Isaka's question. Gina asks, thank you for an interesting presentation. My question is, how safe is the solar cooking system when it comes to exposure to UV?
Yeah, I think the main issue with the solar cooking is actually the direct sunlight. So it's very important to also teach people how to use the solar cooker correctly, that the angle that you do not stand in a way that the reflection goes straight into the eye. So that is really very, very important with the parabolic solar cooker. But it's very possible to use it correctly, standing on the side and always turning away from the sun. And the solar oven is no problem at all because there is no exposure. It's all happening inside.
Wonderful, thank you. And then another one from Pabalu. How do you influence people with higher power, the real decision makers like the government, to think green, to make decisions of thinking of the sustainability of the environment?
That's, of course, an excellent question. I think it has a short, medium, and a long-term answer. So I think our long-term answer is, of course, that learner who asked me back 20 years ago or more about, don't I believe in deforestation? He's probably now something like 35. So hopefully in the next 20 years, he'll be a decision maker and he'll know about NaDEET. Yeah, but I think this is really the thing of why it's so important that as many people as possible actually learn about sustainability and really feel that we need to do something. Namibia has been in the news a lot recently, green hydrogen, but also oil discoveries. So it's a very, on one side, it's fossil fuels. On the other side, it's looking at things like green hydrogen. So decision makers, they are definitely also in need of environmental education and education for sustainable development, and they cannot be forgotten. So maybe you have given me the reason that the next group of people that we must invite to NaDEET Center is exactly that. I always say to my staff, you can ask any one of them, that they need to make sure that they're always on their toes, they're always ready, because you never know when the president might walk in.
Lovely. Wonderful answer, Victoria. And then another important thing to all the TUT students, I'm sorry for lecturing so much this week, but it really is important that you remember that we are incredibly fortunate, both in Namibia and in South Africa, to live in a democracy where you can go and vote. So please do. It is a tendency amongst our youth, especially in South Africa, that you do not go and vote. So you really have the power in your hands. And always remember that whenever a law is put in front of Parliament, it has to go through a system where we as the public have insight into that and can vote for it as well. So please go register and vote. It's really, really important. And what Viktoria just said, it's just going to be completely different if you, the youth that are educated so much more than our parents were, just go and vote. This is really important. I can't reiterate that statement too much, but yes, that's important. That's really important. Cheryl, you are unmuted. The screen's all yours.
Victoria, the age groups that you educate, where do they go from there? Which university, what careers do they go into? Because there is an option of getting into Tshwane University of Technology and taking this field further. Yeah, we shouldn't let this die because they've learned from the best, and let's grow from there. So yeah, we do the nature conservation degree, and they can go on to do advanced, postgrad, masters, and a PhD. So those children that are really, really interested in taking the environmental issue further, maybe we can talk and we can take it further.
Good. We should definitely stay in touch about that. I think most in Namibia, really the options for studying nature conservation directly is through the Namibian University of Science and Technology, where they also now have up to a master's level. And, you know, some of the university students that are coming to us, those ones that I actually showed you celebrating Earth Day, those are actually pre-service teachers. So those were not nature conservation students, those in particular. So they were actually studying to become teachers. And the University of Namibia also has an environmental integrated science program. So, but I will definitely also start to recommend that people could look at Tshwane University.
And Victoria, do you know about ESA?
Of course.
Are you presenting this year?
Unfortunately, I'm not, but Elisa will be presenting together with my colleague Pandu Haidongo, who also presented last year on behalf of NaDEET. And this year's presentation will actually be about learning support materials and looking at how environmental education learning support materials are so important. And I didn't now include this in the presentation, but we are busy. We've just put together a database of all of the resources in the country that are about Namibia, made in Namibia, and we will be putting those onto the Namibian Environmental Education Network website. So we hope that that will be live by the time the ESA conference comes around in September.
Yes, brilliant, because I'm giving one on the use of puppets and muppets and mascots. And yeah, if your team can just, if we can try and bump into one another, I'm sure we've got 4 days of networking, and let's take it further. It's a pity you're not going to be there, but I'll grab hold of your team. And yeah, let's do it. And we'll discuss this further, and I'll try and get a group of my advanced students out to you. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Ooh, lovely little bit of networking there. It's wonderful. Nkululeku, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and the screen's all yours.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm so sorry. My signal has been so bad today. It's been kicking me in and out. But I just wanted to thank Ms. Victoria for the talk. We've had a class with Dr. O where we were looking at EE. Yeah, it was an EE class, and NaDEET came up as she assigned us to go look it up and learn as much as we can about it. And now this talk solidified everything that we found on that research. And it's a very, very wonderful EE center. I hope I do cross paths with it someday. There's a few of my classmates who are very much interested in EE. And this talk was just our thing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool.
Wonderful. Then I think, if it's all right with the team, if there are no other questions, we'll be sending the whole chat section to Victoria. If there's no, let's ask one more time if there's any more questions. Oh, Marty, of course. I mean, what would a Unlocking Nature be without Marty Jasper asking a question? Marty, the screen's all yours.
I was interested in the concept of taking it urban and the whole center in the urban areas and whatever. And I think, you know, that could be amazing just within our own areas in Joburg, whether it was Alexandra or Tembisa or any of those sorts of things. I'm not too sure. I mean, I'm not that familiar with the environmental clubs and things in South Africa or Joburg. Myself, you know, not being in that field in my work. But you also referred to reference material and books and curricula and that sort of thing. And you said it's also part of the school curriculum. Maybe if you can elaborate, how shareable is that sort of those resources and almost set up a model? Have you, as much as you said that you would like to be in touch with Cheryl going forward, I mean, in terms of the South African curriculum, I think there's a lot to share and learn from that we can. And I don't mean this in a funny way, but the little brother of Namibia can teach big brother South Africa a lot of things. So how shareable is all this stuff?
Well, it's so interesting that you phrase it like that, because I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at South Africa and seeing, okay, can we use what you guys have so that we can adapt it? And then we're like, oh no, we really want to write our own because the curriculum, of course, is different. But I think the question that you are really asking is, you know, what's the approach, how to go about it, and what are the lessons learned that we can, you know, really. For me, so much about it is also how can we really empower the environmental education centers that they also see themselves as being service providers to the universities, to the schools, to the government. You know, if that environmental education center is a private run initiative or it is a government center itself, I think this actually, if every one of these centers started to operate on a much higher level, it's actually one of the things that we did when we started NaDEET Center is we said programs must always be Mondays to Fridays. I didn't mention that at the beginning, but for me, this was a non-negotiable topic. I did not want to have people come from Friday to Sunday. Why not? Because environmental education is a key component of the learning program for schools. It's a key component of what we are learning about and also for adults, for the working life. So it shouldn't be something that's just, oh, on the weekend, let's quickly go and be in nature a little bit. It should actually come to the forefront. So this was one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure it was in the week. But then I feel that it is our responsibility as an environmental education center to ensure that if a group comes to us for the week and they are so-called missing school, that we are actually filling that that actually there is no missing of school. So we've taken our entire curriculum, entire program, we've aligned it to the Namibian school curriculum. So, you know, teachers, as Mara Birkes, who came with a group from Maranjamund, I mean, she will testify as well as other teachers. When you come to NaDEET, actually, we are helping you because then you can go back and you can set your exam papers and all of the practical components of the curriculum have basically been taught, you know, for natural sciences and for other subjects. So I think this is really a very important part that environmental education centers also need to realize. And so I think maybe one of the things that I wish that we would do within ESA, and something that I would need more time for, but that we actually would have, you know, a subcommittee that would be environmental education centers and talk about creating a standard and guidelines for how do we run these centers? What should these centers be like? How do we negotiate with government around issues like transport, about time away from school, time away from university, costs? There are a lot of issues, you know, as Cheryl said, it's very difficult to run an EE center. So I think these are also things where we can, in order for us to upscale, we need to also make sure that we've covered these bases. and not just with enthusiasm, but also with some background networking, background linkages, good grounding within the curriculum, and with maybe not an accreditation system necessarily, but guidelines as to good practice.
Oh, thanks. And then a second sort of part of my question is that the institution that I work for every day of my life do actually have one of the larger financial institutions in South Africa do have their own environmental education. I'm not on that side of the organization, but I really I'm going to show the guys the recording. And I hope that they'll reach out to you to also learn from you guys and whatever. And yeah, I mean, I think it was amazing and great. The last question, from a normal person's residential house and your solar cookers and that sort of stuff, how practical is it to say to my wife, chuck out the stove, let's do solar cooking, with someone who works at home sometimes, but often at the office? What are the practicalities of trying to do that for your life? As you say, let's live what we're teaching.
Yeah, I think this is where you need to always think, okay, what are the things that I could do first that are actually the low-hanging fruit? What are the changes that I can make? So am I somebody who takes a shower for 30 minutes? Or am I somebody who does an extraordinary amount of cooking, that I'm using lots of electricity and so on? Am I recycling? What am I buying? Do I take my own cloth bags? I mean, there are actually so many very small baby steps that many people could take that would already make a difference. And I think taking those baby steps first and starting to see the change then would make the question of something like solar cooking. Does it work for you? Of course, you have to look at issues, how far away do you live from home? Are you going home for lunch? What kind of sunshine do you then also have? And I mean, Mardia would then also ask you, if you are also cooking on solar on the weekends, remember, gender equality, everyone can solar cook.
I think I'm going to call it an evening and say thank you very much again to Viktoria and your wonderful, wonderful work, inspiring work to absolutely everyone in the audience tonight. It's been wonderful to have you. You're part of the family now. We've made all the connections, and let's hope we make many more connections after the talk. And for everyone that's listening, that has been listening, remember that Viktoria's talk will be up on our YouTube channel in a bit. And if you're in Namibia and you have a chance to visit, please go and visit them. And on that note, Viktoria, thank you very much for being part of the family and sharing your time and your story with us this evening. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And I also just want to say thank you to all of our participants who are out there taking action and doing good work for the environment, because they are really the ones who can speak for us the most.